with Ed Harstead of Nokia at the Market Focus here at ECOC. Ed, you just presented in the Market Focus. Give us an overview of what you were talking about.
I was talking about two things really. One is the future of TDM PON technologies, and number two, is there an application for PON in the 5G transport market? And I think people are familiar with GPON for fiber to the home. 10 gigabit PONs are starting to be rolled out for residential applications as well. But looking forward for higher speed PONs, we are now at a point where the action in low-cost optics is coming from the data centers. Data centers are driving really low costs today on 25 gigabit optics, and in the future on 50 gigabit optics. And so the opportunity for high-speed PONs here is unlike the old days where we leveraged ecosystems from SDH and SDH transport systems. Now we will be leveraging technologies that come out of the data center. So first, 25 gigabit optics for a 25 gigabit TDM PON, and then subsequent to that, at some point, there'll be a 50 gigabaud ecosystem coming from data centers, and that'll be leveraged by a 50 gigabit TDM PON.
So can TDM PONs cope with 5G?
Yeah, so that's the question that most operators are asking now, because operators are not, right now 10 gigabit PONs are going to be adequate for fiber to the home residential markets for some time. And so the need for a higher speed PON is going to have to come from somewhere else. And right now the hottest thing is, of course, 5G and the transport networks to support them. And so the challenge now is there are varying requirements for 5G transport. We kind of break them down into two pieces. One is the backhaul and the mid-haul slice of 5G transport, and the other is the front haul. Very different transport requirements. So in today's talk, I broke that down into those two halves. The first one, we find that 25 gigabit PON is a really good match for front haul, mid haul, both from a capacity point of view and from a latency point of view. Now, when we talk about front haul, on the other hand, the capacity requirements are really about 5 times higher than it is for mid haul and back haul, and the latency requirements are very tight, on the order of hundreds of microseconds. And so there are efforts to make sure that TDM PONs can support these requirements. One of them is in the ORAN forum, and essentially going into ITU-T, a standard for a cooperative DBA or a cooperative transport interface that will lower the latency on TDM PONs. But we also have to make sure that we can support stat muxing of eCPRI traffic. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself there on front haul. So in mid haul, we find that the capacity of a 25 gig PON for sure can support the requirements for mid haul and back haul. So 25 gig PON we see as a very good fit for that. For front haul, it's a different story. So as I just said, 5 times the capacity requirements, much lower latency, and that, in addition to TDM PONs, they are now looking at WDM PONs. This is like the 9th life for WDM PON. It's been coming back over and over again. This time there may be a good use case for a WDM PON, and the reason is because we're talking about very high bit rates that may not be stat muxable, and I mentioned the low latency, and that's something that could be a good fit for 25 gig WDM PON. The problem with WDM PON, as it always been, is that you need very sophisticated optics, tunable optics, high-speed optics, and this is always, you need AWG filters in your network instead of power splitters, and this has always been a challenge for WDM PON, and that's going to be a challenge again this time. What might be different is that unlike residential applications where WDM PON has been previously targeted, there may be higher willingness to pay for WDM PON in a front haul market. So that's to be determined.
You mentioned partly there standards. So where do standards fit into all of this?
There's a 25 gigabit EPON standard almost finished in IEEE. And on the ITU-T side, there is a project called G.HSP, which will bring forth a 50 gigabit PON standard It doesn't, at this point, include a 25 gigabit PON standard, which many people, including myself and many operators, think is an oversight. And so there's an effort to get a 25 gig PON standard started in ITU-T. There's also effort underway to start a WDM PON standard in ITU-T. Also, those are two efforts that are going on in parallel right now. Operators are pushing for that. We'll have to see where that leads us.
Interesting times. Thank you for talking to us.
You're welcome. Thank you.